All right, I'm a little bit late to my year in review here, but I do want to go over kind of my top 10 games for 2025. This is not specifically games that came out just in 2025. It's basically my top 10 games that I played for the first time in 2025. Some of these are kind of technicalities, and that, I played a little bit of one game or another back in the day, or I tried it and didn't get very far. I'm counting these as kind of first time played because I either started them or I've played the majority of them in 2025. It's only really a couple of those games. Also, some new games obviously came in on the list. I guess I'll start with my number 10 is going to be Lies of P Overture. This is the DLC expansion for the excellent Souls-like Lies of P. Overture added a pretty sizable chunk, of content to the game. Some cool new weapons. I really liked the bow. And there were some really, really cool boss fights and just kind of zones throughout the game. You start in a totally wrecked zoo, and then you go to a cool amusement park thing full of these puppets, and just really, really fun kind of expansion onto that base game. I'm looking forward to whatever that team does next. I'm hoping it's a Lies of P2 type situation. And they really just build on that game. Really, really had a fun time with that. Looks great. Ran really well on my PC. Ran okay on the Steam Deck as well. I think it was Unreal Engine 4, so that definitely helped it out in terms of things like CPU performance. But it was great. The new Gunblade type weapon. That thing was really cool. I don't want to forget that. It had a really cool charge attack, if I remember correctly. I understand some of the complaints that people had about the, boss health bars being particularly excessive, and some of them had these real multi-phase fights, but I never found them too difficult. I did play on, I believe it was my regular new game. It wasn't a new game plus situation. But yeah, I had a great time with it. Highly recommend it to anybody that likes Souls games, especially if you liked Lies of P's base game. It's really just grabbing highlights out of that and putting it all together in a smaller package. My number 9, actually, this kind of came in and surprised me. This is going to be Battlefield 6. I like Battlefield games. I've always enjoyed... I got really into Battlefield 3 when it came out on the PlayStation 3 back in 2011, I believe it was. And that game still looks gangbusters 14 years later or whatever. And it's still a ton of fun if you can get going and not be in a lobby full of cheaters or anything like that. Regardless, 6 was kind of hitting all of my my marks for what I wanted it to be doing and what I was interested in for the franchise. And it came out. I was hesitant at first. I didn't buy it immediately. I bought it a couple weeks later after hearing a lot of the goodwill, and I had a blast. I forget exactly how many hours I have in the game. 40, 50, 60, something like that. Played a ton of the multiplayer. I'm basically just a conquest guy. I'll do some of the other big modes, but I'm not doing any small modes. I played a little bit of the Battle Royale mode as well, whatever it's called, RedSec. Had a good time with it. I didn't have a really good squad of people that I was playing with regularly, so I was doing duo modes and squad modes, and playing with people that either weren't on mic or just weren't the most effective teammates. Maybe I wasn't the most effective teammate as well because I was still learning, but regardless, I thought it was okay. Didn't stick with the RedSec mode, although again, if I had a squad of people, I'd probably be doing it a little bit more because there were some really fun moments. A team of 4 drives by in a Jeep and I just blast them with an RPG and get a quad kill. That's cool. I don't know how the game is feeling right now in terms of players. I know there's been some scuttlebutt about people liking things, people not liking things as the game has gotten updates. Personally, I'll dip in and out at this point, play with some friends, but I'm not, on it every day like I had been right when I got it, which is how I play games. I'm not a super big multiplayer gamer, especially in multiplayer team-based competitive shooters. I'll play a little bit. I'll get a hankering for it here and there, which I did definitely this year with Battlefield 6, and it really delivered for me on that front. Number 8, Elden Ring Night Rain. I love From Software games. Elden Ring, I have a ton of hours in, like 300 or something like that, and that's pretty significant for me specifically. I know some people are going to be like, 300 hours, you're just getting started. And it's like, no, I've played enough of that game to say that I love it, and I've seen everything I need to in it. I'll probably still play more of it. But Elden Ring Night Rain was a really cool variation on that world and that team's combat design and just game design. You know, it takes this foundation that was Elden Ring and then makes it a open world co-op kind of battle royale roguelike experience. Toss a bunch of Elden Ring bosses, beat everything up a little bit, drop players into that kind of semi-randomized world where they just rush around, get loot, and then face cool bosses, including really cool throwback bosses, things like the Gaping Dragon from Dark Souls 1, and then the DLC came out, which I haven't played yet, that brings in folks like Artorias from Dark Souls 1, and all the final bosses as well. The Night Lords were really cool and creative and had unique experiences that really rock and elevated that game, I think, more than if it had not had such unique bosses that also played into the co-op aspects of the game. I know there are ways to play solo now, like officially, as well as duo and the traditional trios mode. Definitely recommend playing that with friends if you can. That's the way to go. I mostly played a lot of duos with a buddy of mine before it was officially a duos thing. I played a good amount with randoms too, and it was pretty good. So yeah, Elden Ring Night Rain was a blast. I am looking forward to getting back into it with some other friends later on, and I'm hoping, you know, they enjoy it as much as I did. Next up, number 7 is going to be the PlayStation 2 classic Devil May Cry. I had played Devil May Cry 5 maybe 2 or so years ago, had a pretty good time with it, and then just never played any of the other games in the series. You know, I saw a buddy play most of Devil May Cry 3 back in the day being like, I don't know, 2020 on the PS2. But so I picked up the HD collection on PS3 earlier this year because I wanted to finally like jump in and give them a go, and I had a really good time with DMC. Dante isn't quite as wild as he kind of looks like he gets in some of the later games, but the overall feel of the game is so on point, you know, with the style and the just aesthetic, especially the UI design is so of its era, but it is incredibly fun. You know, every time it like warps in these weapons that you get and things like that in the menus, it's awesome. That being said, you know, I definitely did have some complaints with the game. The way the combat system works and the control scheme being, you know, set up the way that it is, in that you have the fixed camera angles and then it's directional inputs for Dante to do his certain moves, can be a little confusing at times. If you're playing traditionally, you know, a third-person camera on the right stick game, the controls they don't work in the same way as they do in this kind of thing. So in this, if you're looking at Dante from a side-on perspective, you have to do left and then right to do your stinger move, or whatever it's called, the one that you kind of dash forward with the sword out. But if you're looking at it from a different perspective, you need to do it differently on the controller, and that was definitely something to get accustomed to and figure out. And I never quite did, especially with some of the boss fights. Those fixed camera angles were a little annoying. I did really have a pretty good time with the game, and I see why it was such a big deal at the time, and I definitely recommend people going back and playing it for what it is now. The repetitive nature of the bosses didn't help it in my eyes, but the overall experience was a ton of fun, and I really liked it. Although I didn't like it as much as a different Capcom PlayStation 2 video game, which was Onimusha Warlords, a game that I, again, never had played before, and had just as good, if not a better time than Devil May Cry, which is why it is my number 6 on my list of 2025 games that I played for the first time. Onimusha Warlords was rad. I loved this game. You know, it had great vibes. The pre-rendered backgrounds were really cool and detailed, and the game was just a ton of fun. You know, I beat it in 8 hours or something like that, maybe a little bit less. Really fun bosses, a couple of annoying, you know, camera angle, tank control issues, but I adored Onimusha Warlords, so much so that I went out and purchased Onimusha 2 and Onimusha 3 on the PlayStation 2 immediately after beating it, because I wanted to continue on in that story. I'm a couple hours into Onimusha 2, But Onimusha Warlords, Onimusha as a series is something that I've always been interested in. You know, Onimusha 3 having Jean Reno in there always intrigued me because that guy looks so cool all of the time. So yeah, Onimusha Warlords was really cool. Highly recommend it. There is a remaster that came out a couple of years ago on, I think, most of the current systems. Should be pretty cheap. If you have a PS2, you know, you can track down a copy of the game for not a lot either, which is what I did, you know, and it was cool. Sengoku era samurai Resident Evil is such a great collection of things. The combat system was also really neat, you know, in the sort of like Kingdom Hearts actually a couple years later, where, you know, you attack, and if you attack at the right time, it counters. You know, you kind of clash blades with enemies, and that's just a lot of fun. You get a couple different weapons in the game as well that are cool and have elemental ties. PS2 specifically, that music on the PlayStation 2 version really impressed me. I know there's some controversy around that, and they've changed the music in the re-release, but the music itself was really cool in the PS2 version, and I'm glad that that's the version that I played. All right, number 5 here is going to be Ace Combat 6 Fires of Liberation, only available on the Xbox 360. I bought this game a couple of years ago, honestly in hopes to play it on an emulator. I believe it's Xenia that is that Xbox 360 emulator, and it did not work. It was a total buggy mess on my computer, and I just kind of gave up at the time. And that was right after I had finished Ace Combat 0, the Belkan War on the PlayStation 2. But Ace Combat 6, I finally was able to play this year because I went and borrowed an Xbox One from my brother-in-law, and my fiance wanted to play Viva Pinata, which was a classic for her back in the day. So I got the Xbox One from my brother-in-law, and then I was like, oh wait, I can play Ace Combat 6 finally. So hopped in, and, you know, I don't think it is as revolutionary as something like Ace Combat 4 was, or evolutionary as even those PS2 sequels, but I had a really, really good time with Ace Combat 6 and its flight system and combat design, the expanded operations of each mission, you know, where some of the missions have 3 to 6 different kind of sub-missions within it. You can pick which ones you want to do. Some of them are going to be air-to-air, some of them are air-to-ground, that kind of thing. Really expanded the scope of those missions in a fun way beyond what the PlayStation 2 was capable of. That being said, I don't think the kind of 360 era graphics, especially in the cutscenes, held up as well as the kind of variety of different presentation styles that the series used on the PlayStation 2. You know, we had motion graphic novel in like Ace Combat 4, and then CG cutscenes in Ace Combat 5, and then a bunch of like live action FMV in Ace Combat 0. But then Fires of Liberation went in we're going to try to run this, I don't know if it's real time, but rendered in engine at the very least, of these early 360 ass character models, especially of children that just like don't translate super well 15 years later, 20-ish years later. If you get past that, which, you know, I still enjoyed the story, I just didn't think the presentation of it was as effective as I would have liked, because it was trying to be more realistic than it looks, I guess, at this time. But it was really fun. It was especially the in-cockpit story, as I'm going to call it, because there's the story of the children that are in the city after it's been taken over by the invading forces, and then the story of this woman whose fighter pilot husband was killed in the initial invasion, who is then a refugee essentially, and then her whole story. It's not a bad story, and then also the story of the invading force kind of commanding officer or higher lieutenant, sergeant, whatever he is, I don't even remember, being like, oh, maybe these kids aren't so bad and we shouldn't be doing this, you know. That whole side of the story didn't compel me a ton. The in-cockpit story with you and your wingmen was, I think, more effective and more fun. But Ace Combat 6, I had a really good time with it. A couple of missions were really, really a pain. If you've played the game, you probably know which ones I'm thinking about, with lots of drones. If you have a way to play Ace Combat 6 Fires of Liberation, I highly recommend that you do if you are into that franchise and haven't played it yet. I picked up a copy for pretty cheap, and you certainly can too. Or you can go and find a really exclusive and rare HOTAS version for the 360, which I almost bought a copy of earlier this year on Facebook Marketplace and decided against it because really, I don't need more junk in my house. So Ace Combat 6 is my number 5. And now my number 4 is Skin Deep. Skin Deep is a kind of, I'm going to call it light immersive sim. You know, it's not super dense in terms of the level geometry or the length of levels, where you get thawed out and save a crew of cats manning spaceships that are attacked by pirates. Those pirates don't like you because of your funky wonky shadow clone. You play as Nina Pasadena, and your alter ego there is your main antagonist, and the game is just really cool. It's definitely an immersive sim. Don't take me wrong when I say it's a light immersive sim. By that, I just kind of mean they're more bite-sized levels than Dishonored or like a Deus Ex type thing. You know, it feels like they're more compact. It's kind of a linear story. You know, you're not going back to spaces. You can replay missions, but you don't go back, and it's a linear story. Systems driven. It's what you expect. It's kind of stealthy. It's immersive sim. You can get guns, you can shoot people, or you can throw black pepper at people, make them sneeze, and then from there you can jump on their backs and slam them into radios and stuff on the walls and electrocute them to death. When you do, their little heads pop off. They start spouting insults at you, and then you have to grab their heads and then launch them out of airlocks or out the trash chute or down, flush them down the toilet to get rid of them fully. It's great fun. Not a huge game. I think I beat it in 12 hours or so. This is based on the Doom 3 engine. Cool game. Highly recommend it. Great music as well. And that is my number 4, Skin Deep.
Tell me where she's hiding.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Liar! I'll shave you.
Do your worst. I've been shaved before.
Number 3 is Sword of the Sea. This is by Giant Squid. Some of the people that used to work at that game company. You can see that very evidently in the art style of this game. It's very Journey. The art director of Journey worked on this game. Sword of the Sea is kind of a flow platformer almost. You're riding around on a sword as a hoverboard, surfboard type thing, and it just feels so much fun. There's a trick system in the game. You don't really need to do many of them, but they're cool. There's no real combat, and then there's these cool parts where you get to ride on a dolphin or a shark that change up the gameplay and change up the feel of moving around the world, but it's just awesome. It's Austin Wintory score once again with that team, and it's just a beautiful game, a well-made game. It's also not very long, maybe 5 or 6 hours. There are some completionist things that you can do, some high score runs and I think some New Game Plus and some other hidden puzzle type things, but overall, Sword of the Sea is, I'm frustrated with myself for not having jumped into things like Abzu or the Pathless before this from that team, because the Pathless looked really cool, and I never got a chance to it because it was a very early PS5 game, and I didn't have a PS5 until a couple years into the life cycle. Sword of the Sea, highly recommend it. Again, it's not super expensive. I believe it's on the PlayStation Plus premium tier, part of the game catalog, or it was at launch. If you can get it, highly recommend it. The music is awesome. The game is a ton of fun, and it's a real looker. I don't have a ton more else to say about it beyond play it, enjoy it. Sword of the Sea, my number 3. My number 2 game of 2025 that I played/beat for the first time is Final Fantasy XIII. Originally released outside of Japan in early 2010. It's Final Fantasy XIII. It's the one with lightning and the one people tell you that you shouldn't play alongside FF8. I had such a good time with Final Fantasy XIII. Oh my gosh. Incredible music. Great characters, super charming world. I actually really liked the game's linear nature, the hallway criticism that the game got so much of when it came out and after it was out, and that FF13-2 tried to correct against. I really liked it. It made so much sense thematically. The first half of the game, you're being chased. You were literally running and trying to escape from capture. So of course it's a hallway, of course it's linear, because you can't go back. The story itself really compelled me and propelled me forwards as well. I wanted to see the next things that happened, even once I got to the Grand Pulse kind of open world running around area after you get out of Cocoon. And just, it was great. It's not as complicated as other people have made it out to be. It definitely has a couple of those proper nouns that throw you off if you aren't paying attention. But overall, I mean, I just had such a good time with FF13. I've tried playing the game a couple times before this year. I've owned it on PC for years. It blew my mind. Initially, I felt like I had kind of been haunted by that opening cutscene and kind of that intro sequence of FF13 for like half of my life. You know, that opening cutscene with the train barreling through Hanging Edge, and then you're playing as Lightning and Sazh, and then you get to meet Snow a little bit. The game was originally announced in 2006 alongside Versus 13, and like a couple of months after Final Fantasy XII hit shelves in Japan. Like, that game had been announced when I was 10. I never played it. I actually played Final Fantasy 13-2 when it came out because I ended up winning a contest on Games Radar and got the game in some little prologue book that gave me some backstory, but never played 13. Never bought it. Just, it slipped by. And then when I finally sat down and I was like, I am going to beat Final Fantasy 13, I am so glad I made myself do that. Because this game, like a ton of bricks, really, the game isn't trying to be an open world RPG. It's not trying to be this 110-hour, 130-hour story that you languish in the world doing side content, which there is a good amount of side content in the game. But especially that first chunk of the game really worked for me. So FF13 had really gotten its hooks into me. I loved Vanille and Sazh probably the most, but even like Lightning and Snow and Hope and Fang all worked for me as characters. There's like a moment pretty early on in the game as you're getting back to Hope's hometown. It's him and Lightning together going through this underground sewer / like greenhouse thing. I don't know. It doesn't explain itself very well, and certainly doesn't look like a greenhouse. But they have this little moment, this exchange, that the voice acting from the woman that plays Lightning just kind of made my jaw drop, and I was like, whoa, I didn't realize this game was going in that direction, or that it had the that kind of energy available to it.
When I was fighting, there was no time to think about it. It felt good just to give in. But now you start talking about hope. I'm sorry, I messed up.
It's my fault.
And from that point, I knew I was going to love the game, and I definitely recommend people take the time, spend a little bit of their energy on it, and play FF13. I don't think you'll be disappointed if you're into that kind of game, into the franchise, and just haven't played 13, or you want to jump in after playing something like Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which definitely takes some cues from Final Fantasy 13. I don't know what to say. PC version definitely has a couple of problems. It's largely been solved by modders and hardware getting more powerful. I played a bunch of it on the Steam Deck, actually, and it worked very well there without any sort of extra mods. But then on my main PC, I went and installed the HD movie mods, as well as some higher LOD character models and things like that. Make the game look a little bit nicer on a bigger screen. But played on the PS3, played on the Xbox Series X, and the Xbox One X versions of the game are running at higher resolutions and look very pleasant. Even if you have to go and track down the original version of the game on an original system, it's worth your time, is how I feel about it at the end of the day. It's cool. Final Fantasy 13, my number 2 game that I first time played or beat in 2025. So now we're going to go to my number 1 game of the year, and it's Monster Hunter Wilds. My number 1 game of the year is Monster Hunter Wilds. The moment-to-moment hunting, when you're actually in the fight, in a hunt, any monster, doesn't matter, any weapon, is some of the most fun and just like expressive in the series. I'm mostly an Insect Glaive player. That's how I played the majority of this game. It's how I played the majority of Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak and World/Iceborne. And beyond that, this game is a mess. Beyond the actual moment-to-moment hunting, this game has so many problems. They sanded away things like getting materials because you can just point your little reticle at stuff and grapple hook most things pretty easy. Your Sacred, the mount that you ride on, will route itself to the monster without you having to do anything. It's sanded away a lot of the other kind of hunting and tracking aspects in World that I really liked. The scraping up mucus from Anjanath, or finding feather plumes from Puke Puke in World and in the Ancient Forest. It did sand away a lot of those things, but fundamentally, I had a ton of fun with this game. I think the monsters that are in the game right now, especially now at the end of 2025 and beginning of 2026, are a really great roster. Lagiacrus was brought in. Dogmazios, the big kind of final, almost raid boss, is here now. He is really cool. Seregios, Steve, however you pronounce it, he's there now. He's a lot of fun. And then even all the base monsters. Uthduna, New Udra are really cool. Ray Dow is such a cool monster. Even some of like the ones that I think are kind of stinkers, like Chematrice or Gypceros, are pretty cool. And fun little fights. It has its hooks in me so much. I could stop recording this right now and go hunt for 2 hours and have a great time. And that's kind of where I end up falling with this game and why it is my number one game of the year, is that all of the problems aside, I would so happily jump into this game. Any of my friends were like, hey, what are you up to tonight? You want to hunt some monsters? I would be there immediately because I like hunting monsters in that game. It's gotten to the point now where I am using a bunch of different weapons. I've learned the Great Sword. I've learned the dual swords. I've learned sword and shield. I was a longsword kind of like secondary weapon in things like Rise and World, and it's just become so much more fun in this game as well. I picked up the bow and arrow and really like that in this game. Even like Charge Blade, I've gotten myself deeper into how that works. So I'm really jumping into all these different weapons at this point as well. Hammer, I like big bonking guys too. It's been a lot of fun. At the end of the day, that's what I'm going to value the most here. It is a game that I had the most fun with this year, and I played a ton of it. It's the most that I've played of a Monster Hunter in kind of like that opening period. I don't know how much more I'm going to play in 2026, depending on when that expansion comes out, but I will be there for whatever that expansion may be. Yeah, Monster Hunter Wilds, the game runs terribly. It has so many performance problems. I'm playing on PC. I've got a relatively beefy PC. I have a 9700X, 32 gigs of pretty fast DDR5 RAM, an RTX 4070 Super, and it's not the most powerful, but like I'm getting 60 FPS at a DLSS 1440p. Like, it's absurd how badly that game runs. It's gotten better. They fixed a lot of problems, especially with like your kind of 1% or 0.1% lows. The spikes down, the stutters and things like that. That stuff has all gotten better. But the game is still a bit of a nightmare, honestly. I don't know exactly how the PlayStation and Xbox versions are, but I can't imagine they're great. There's been talk about there being a Switch 2 version of the game. I hope that they have a really good 30 FPS lock for that game, because I think that will be the only way that makes it playable on that system. And I really hope that the team there is able to correct the ship a little bit more in terms of performance going into this year and with an expansion later on. And moving beyond Wilds as well. I really am hopeful that they really look at the problems that this game had in terms of performance and this kind of player retention as a result of that, and readjust moving forward. But ultimately, Monster Hunter Wilds is a great video game when it works right. And for that, it's my number one game of the year.